this problem is happening isn't because of the Ukrainians, as I've seen many commentators online saying to the Ukrainians just you accept a deal to help the international food prices. It is the Russians that created the crisis. You are blaming the victim for what the victimizer has done to them. So let's talk about the Ukrainian grain deal. For those of you who don't know, Ukraine and Russia has had a grain deal that was mediated by third parties that made it so that the Ukrainian government could export Ukrainian produced grain, considering it's one of the biggest bread baskets of the world, to many countries around the world. This allowed the Ukrainians to transport, I think it was about like 33.2 million tons of grain out of Ukraine through this grain deal. A lot of countries outside of Ukraine also wanted this to be the case because many countries in the world rely on Ukrainian grain for their food supply. Many countries in Africa, for example, rely on Ukrainian grain to help stabilize food prices. And even if you don't directly buy Ukrainian grain, the lack of access to Ukrainian grain can cause instability in global food prices and make it so anything that relies on grain could go up in value and make it harder for working class people or lower income people around the world to afford food. And so because of that, it was not only a priority for the Ukrainians to be able to export their product and help their economy, which is under siege, but it was also important for these other countries to be able to stabilize food prices within their borders. And so eventually, a grain deal was negotiated and then extended, I believe, in May by 2 months by Turkish negotiators. Now, 2 months later, last grain ship goes into a port somewhere in Turkey or passes through Turkey, and the deal has expired. And the Russians have clearly stated that they have no intention of renewing the deal. And the reasons they give a few reasons, but I think one of the main reasons I want to highlight is that they're angry that their products are being sanctioned, their agricultural products like fertilizer. And so if they want to reopen this grain deal, they want the sanctions on their agricultural products like fertilizer to be removed. Let's read a little bit of this article. The deal allowing Ukraine to safely export grain via the Black Sea has officially expired after Russia pulled out of the crucial agreement. Moscow notified the UN, Turkey, and Ukraine on Monday they would not renew the deal, accusing the West of not keeping its side of the bargain. The decision has been condemned by world leaders who say it will affect some of the planet's poorest people. Russia said it would return to the agreement if its conditions were met. The deal formally came to an end at midnight, Tuesday, Istanbul time. It had let cargo ships pass through the Black Sea from ports in Odessa. Oh my God, I'm just going to say Odessa. Russian President Vladimir Putin has long complained that parts of the deal allowing the export of Russian food and fertilizers has not been honored. In particular, he said that grain has not been supplied to poorer countries, which was the condition of the agreement. Russia has repeatedly complained that Western sanctions were restricting its own agricultural exports. Putin repeatedly threatened to pull out of the agreement. The country's foreign ministry on Monday morning reiterated these grievances, accusing the West of open sabotage and of selfishly putting the commercial interests of the deal ahead of its humanitarian goals. But Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan told reporters he believed that Mr. Putin wants to continue the agreement and that they would discuss the renewal of the deal when they met in person next month. The grain deal is important as Ukraine is one of the world's largest exporters of sunflower, maize, and wheat and barley. Following Russian invasion in February 2022, naval vessels blockaded the Ukrainian ports and trapped 20 million tons of grain. The blockade meant global food prices skyrocketed. It also threatened food supplies to a number of Middle Eastern and African countries which heavily rely on Ukrainian grain. An agreement was finally brokered in July of last year with the help of the United Nations and Turkey. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said his country intended to continue exporting grain, highlighting the agreement was made up of two deals that mirrored each other, one signed by Ukraine and the other by Russia. We are not afraid, he said, of Russia's decision to withdraw from the deal. Okay, so let me just quickly put out there. The Russian government invaded Ukraine. They are the ones that have created this crisis. It is their fault. They are the ones who invaded Ukraine. They are the ones who are bombing Ukraine. They are the ones that are occupying Ukrainian farms that are making it so that the grain that is exported could be in a larger quantity to further help food prices, but they're occupying those farms. Many of those farms have been riddled with mines and explosives, and I've met these people who are unable to, toil their farms because they're filled with unexploded ordnances that the Russians left behind when they were pushed back, particularly uh, 62 TM62 tank mines, anti-tank, anti-armor, armored vehicle mines. Those are riddled through forests all across the Kharkiv Oblast. I've seen them myself. And it's not just those mines, it's Mod 50 mines, it's butterfly mines, which are extremely destructive to not only the local civilian population, but have been known to drag the attention of children because of how much they look like, look like toys. It is the Russians that have created this crisis, from the invasion to how they've occupied farms to how they've killed farmers, destroyed farm equipment, and have, riddled the farms that have been liberated with mines and unexploded ordnances. Okay, so they are the ones creating this crisis. When you invade another country and butcher its people like that, you cannot then complain that other countries don't want to buy your products, other countries are sanctioning your products, and other countries don't want to do business with you. You're the one that created the crisis in the first place. The reasons food prices skyrocketed was because the Russians invaded Ukraine. But yet I'll often see people use this deal and Ukrainian grain to specifically advocate against Ukrainian sovereignty, as in the peace agreement has to be met immediately, concede to Russian demands to help international food prices skyrocketed, to help the skyrocketing international food prices, as if the labor of Ukrainian farm workers and their natural wealth of their farms is not their decision on what to do with it or not. If the Ukrainians wanted to light all their grain on fire, which I don't think they want to do, and they wouldn't, that's their right. It's their stuff. It's their property. If they're being invaded, they can do whatever they want with their grain. They don't want to do that. They want to export the grain, right? But the reason this problem is happening isn't because of the Ukrainians, as I've seen many commentators online saying to the Ukrainians to accept a deal to help the international food prices. It is the Russians that created the crisis. You are blaming the victim for what the victimizer has done to them. What the Russians have done to the Ukrainians. You're blaming the Ukrainians for that. It is perfectly reasonable for nation states not to want to buy Russian products and deal with the Russians as they destroy Ukraine's agricultural potential and cause this crisis in the first place. Okay? They don't want to finance the Russian war effort. They don't want to finance a Russian economy which is currently directed its economic potential at butchering the Ukrainians. The Russians have increased their military budget by like 200 to 300%. They are taking every cent of what they can out of their economy and throwing it at killing Ukrainians. Part of the reason why the ruble is losing more and more value after it was artificially protected by the Russian state for so long. It is why so many people are leaving Russia to seek work elsewhere. It is why so many companies are pulling out of Russia, and they're feeling the full force of this economic pressure. And so one of the few tools they still have, one of the few tools of escalation they still have, since they've thrown everything in the kitchen sink at the Ukrainians, is now trying to not only hold the Ukrainians hostage, but hold the entire world hostage. Specifically, it's food prices and trying to hold nations that are food insecure hostage. If you entertain this and you say, you know what, you're right, we're going to stop sanctioning you, Russia. We're going to give you everything you want. All we're doing is sending the message, hold the world hostage and its food prices hostage, and you can get whatever you want. A few concessions here and there for the good of the world, I can understand. But for those who are asking the Ukrainians just to give the Russians whatever they want in order to, stabilize global food prices, all you're going to do is set up the world for the next food price crisis. Because all you've done is encourage this behavior. I have no interest in that. It is Russians creating the crisis. The impetus is on the Russians to stop the blockade. The question is now, what are the Turks, who have made a very big point in pride of this deal, of this agreement, of the grain deal? They have touted it to show, their ability as an intermediary and as a person who can, help bring about a peace deal. That pitch of the Turks being able to bring about a peace deal looks a lot weaker if the deals that they negotiate end up falling apart like this. So they're going to have a deep interest in trying to bring back this grain deal together. Hopefully they can, as much as I don't like Erdogan. I like unstable international food prices more. And I know I hate unstable international food prices more, and I hate the fact that Ukrainian farmers are unable to sell their wheat and barley and their products overseas. And so I hope and wish them good luck in the struggle against Russia's attempt to starve the world population. Oh, actually, Ukraine released a statement. I think Zelenskyy released a statement. We can read the statement. This chat is displayed on Twitch stream, though. Twitch stream, I don't know what Catfield is saying.
Occurred.
Casey from, oh, hello.
Flemmy gave Catfield_AA tier 1 subscription. With TJ and Paul, you just said Russia's only way of escalation is nuclear force, and now you contradict yourself. Lost in your labyrinth of lies.
I have been lost in my labyrinth of lies. You know, you're right. You're right. I did not consider. I didn't consider this because number one, I already kind of filed it in my head like they were gonna do it because they're running out of options, and this is one of the few options they have left. So I didn't really even consider it much in the conversation. But also, when we were talking about escalation, I thought we were talking about military escalation, not really economic escalation. But you did get me, Flemmy. You got me. You corrected me. You're the great debunker. Congratulations. Let's listen to what Zelenskyy has to say. He released a statement about this. Dear Ukrainians, I held a conference call today. Oh my god, 1 second. This is traveling quick. Dear Ukrainians, I wish you good health. First, today I held a conference call. Front, security, supply routes. Commanders, SSU chiefs, intelligence chiefs, defense and foreign intelligence, Minister of Internal Affairs, Defense Ministry. We do everything in detail and every day so that our soldiers have everything they need for active operation. Second, I thank each of our rescuers, each policeman, and each volunteer, and each doctor who save our people after Russian shelling. Today's terrorist attack on the Sumy region, Kharkiv region, Donbass, Kherson region, and Zaporozhye will not go unanswered by our soldiers for sure. Third, food security. We are preparing a conversation with the UN Secretary General. Oh, I forgot to mention this. Of course, the UN Secretary General condemned Russia's pullout of the deal. They said it was bad, and they hope that Russia re-enters the deal as soon as possible. I forgot to mention. Ukraine's position has always been and will be as clear as possible. No one has the right to destroy the food security of any nation. If a bunch of people somewhere in the Kremlin think that they supposedly have the right to decide whether food will be on the table in different countries, Egypt or Sudan, Yemen or Bangladesh, China or India, Turkey or Indonesia, then the world has an opportunity to show that blackmail is not allowed to anyone. From the first day of the full-scale aggression, Russia destroyed navigation freedom in the Black and Azov Seas. Russia hit our ports, grain terminals, with missiles and drones, and even granaries were hit. Actually, I believe I visited some like grain silos that were destroyed very early on in the war. It was, I think, mid last year. It was like riddled with like shrapnel bullets, but it was also directly on the front line of Zaporozhye. So I mean, that is to be expected. It became the forward operating position at one point. The only possible consequence of this is the destabilization of food markets and social chaos in the countries critically dependent on food imports. Well, I don't know how much more unstable Sudan could be because of rising food prices. I think there's a lot of factors in Sudan that are already creating rising food prices. But for the rest of those countries, it's a good point. Ukrainian food is basic security for 400 million people. Last year, the world took the right action regarding the Russian threat to food security. Together with Turkey and the United Nations, we launched the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Its results are eloquent. Almost 33 million tons of agricultural product were exported to 45 countries. 60% of the volumes went to countries of Africa or Asia in particular, like Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, oh my goodness, long list of countries, Kenya, Egypt, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Sudan. They were also sent to China, India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Pakistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and it is very important. Our food export allows saving lives in these countries. I didn't realize it was that extensive. I knew it was extensive. I didn't realize it was that extensive. Like Yemen and Somalia, different people of different religions and different ethnic origins, but they all have the same right to life. In addition to export, we also launched the Grain from Ukrainian Humanitarian Initiative. 34 donor states joined in, and I thank every donor who helped save people from starvation, primarily in African countries. Everyone has a right to stability. Africa has the right to stability. Asia has the right to stability. Europe has every right to stability. And therefore, we must all care about security and protection from Russian madness. And the Black Sea Grain Initiative can and should keep operating, if without Russia, then without Russia. The agreement on the export of grain, this is an agreement with Turkey and the UN, remains valid. The only thing that is needed now is its careful implementation and decisive pressure from the world on the terrorist state. I have sent official letters to President of Turkey Erdogan and UN Secretary General Guterres with a proposal to continue the Black Sea Grain Initiative or its analog in a trilateral format as it is best. Ukraine, the UN, and Turkey can jointly ensure the operation of the food corridor and the inspection of vessels. For those of you who don't know, when it would reach Turkey, the vessels would be inspected to make sure that weapons were not being smuggled out of the country. It is necessary for everyone in the world, and everyone who supports it will become a savior of life in a huge territory. From Morocco to China, from Indonesia to Lebanon. One more. I want to especially thank Sweden. Our Swedish friends have approved a strategy to help Ukraine, in particular with reconstruction, a strategy until 2027. This is very important. Signals of long-term support. Support for life, restoration of life, and support for the fact that Russian terror will clearly lose. Mr. Prime Minister, the entire government of Sweden, everyone in Sweden, I thank you very much. Glory to everyone who helps us defend ourselves from Russian terror. Glory to each one of our warriors. Glory to our beautiful people. Glory to Ukraine. Okay, so I only have one last thing to say about this. A trilateral arrangement is not impossible, but it would depend upon the Turkish government's earlier statements not just being cap and not just being them chest beating. If somebody can find the statement, because I was looking for it, I was trying to dig it up. I was laying in bed, tired after a long day of frolicking through Kharkiv, trying to find this for today's segment. I remember vividly the Turkish government recently, and this was one of the kerfluffles between the Turkish and Russian governments. One of the kerfluffles between the Turkish and Russian government was the release of five Azovstal prisoners to Ukraine when they were supposed to, according to the agreement that they reached with Russia, they were supposed to stay in Turkey till the end of the war. Another thing that really miffed Russia was them approving Swedish membership of NATO, and that's, of course, after them approving Finnish membership of NATO, effectively making that ocean above Kaliningrad the Sea of NATO. But the third thing that really miffed the Russians was that Turkey suggested that they could still go through with the grain deal without the Russians. That if push comes to shove, the Turks could take their fleet of ships, sail them to the port, and then escort the grain ships out to Africa and Asia. Now, this would mean Turkish military vessels directly challenging Russian military vessels. And the fact that something like that could even be, it's the Baltic Ocean, sorry. Something like that could even be thought, even openly considered, shows how much Turkey is leaning more towards NATO, leaning more towards European markets than the Russians. If that was to happen, then they would come to a question of, does the Russians want to challenge the Turks while also challenging the Ukrainians while also challenging the United Nations, while it's already committed the vast majority of its military resources to Ukraine. Now, of course, its navy is different because there isn't any large-scale naval battles going on right now, but it has also already taken naval casualties. The Moskova was sunk. Could it risk another incident like that? Some Russian destroyers going to the bottom of the sea? Could it risk the complete riddling and destruction of the Russian Black Sea Fleet after it's already taken so much damage and had to be replaced by other ships? Doesn't want its relationship with Turkey to degrade to that degree. Probably not. But it would also be a big risk for Turkey because the Russians could just hold the line and wait for the Turks to make their move. Would the Turks be willing to make their move? If push comes to shove, how would a Turkish-Russian naval military engagement go? Either way, it could have just been a bunch of talk in an effort to intimidate the Russians into staying into the deal, because the Russians might not want to have another security crisis when they've already committed to the vast majority of their resources to the invasion of Ukraine. And that might have been the intention, but we don't know, and we won't know until we see how the Turks pursue going forward. Because right now it seems like Erdogan has said, oh, don't worry, the Russians really actually do want a grain deal. This is all just, I guess, for show. And they're going to pursue a grain deal, hopefully, after we talk to them, because Putin probably still wants a grain deal. Whether or not they can negotiate that, who knows? But if they don't, balls in Turkey's court. Turkey's trying to up its international image through these negotiations, through being the international mediator. And if it wants to pitch itself, like I said earlier, as the person to bring peace to Ukraine, as the person to negotiate and mediate the inevitable peace deal or whatever is done once this war is over, if they want to pitch themselves, it doesn't look good if the one thing they did negotiate fell apart.